and also reduced damage by 10, as long as he cleared the dungeon alone. Throwing the sword on his shoulder, X told himself that he would need this title since he would probably be entering dungeons alone many more times. However, even after defeating the boss and clearing the dungeons, he still hadn't found any treasure or anything like that, which could only mean that the legend was a lie. But suddenly an idea popped into his head. Leaning over the ground, he used the heavenly grind skill, and in the next instant, the system reported that he had found an item. The item was a branch called Branch of Pure Spirit. It had a unique quality and could create a flame that ignited the spirit. The holy flame lasts semi-permanently. The special effect was that it reacted to darkness. Looking at the burning branch, which could serve as an excellent torch, the protagonist noted that he had no idea what effect the holy flame had. Suddenly, his attention was drawn to a wall that, when he shone the torch on it, began to glow in some places. Interested in this, he stepped closer. The next moment a sign appeared saying that the sacred flame had begun to react to the darkness. Suddenly, the protagonist realized that the holy flame reacts to dark energy. The wall he was shining the torch on not only sparkled, but shone with precious stones. That's when X realized that this was the treasure. So, after he had cleared and found the treasure Ron had told him about, he returned to the Tyler family home. Ron, who was waiting for him in the house, was worried that X had gone down to the dungeon by himself. So when he returned unharmed, the boy was very happy. He scratched the back of his head and said that he was very worried and thought he was just wasting his time, but he was very sorry for that. After all, it was just a legend and he wasn't sure if it was true. Then X laughed and said, "What waste of time is he talking about? After all, his father was not mistaken at all, the treasures were really there." Ron was confused and asked what X was referring to. What treasures were he talking about? X looked at the boy and said that it would probably be better for him to see for himself. Then he pulled out a large piece of gemstone from his pocket and showed it to Ron. The latter was very surprised to see it for real. He could not believe that the legend was true, there were indeed treasures in the dungeon. Then X explained that it was dark iron. Dark iron is a rare material that is considered one of the 5 best in the world of Fate. It has a hardness incomparable to steel and has the characteristic given to dark attribute if the equipment is made of dark iron. Because the dark attribute is a cheating attribute that is superior to all attributes except the light attribute, that is why dark iron is priced incredibly high. Ron then grabbed a piece of dark iron and fell to his knees with it. He could not believe what he was seeing. He leaned down hugging the piece of iron and started crying, saying that his father was right. Wiping away his tears, Ron said he would definitely rebuild his family and make his mother and sister happy. He added that his father should keep an eye on him. Then he suddenly grabbed X's hand and began to thank him, saying that he didn't even know how to repay him for this great favor. He was confused, because he did not expect to see such a reaction. X laughed shyly, scratched his head and said he would come back later, but he had to go. Then Ron stopped him and said he had something he wanted to give him right now. He held out his hands and told him to take it. It was a precious thing. Immediately a system window appeared with a description of the item. It was the coat of arms of House Taylor, unique, the noble family of Veneta. The user would be recognized as a member of House Taylor and would receive a plus 100 boost to their reputation. The special effect is that the user can exert influence at the same level as House Tyler, and the influence can vary depending on the prestige of House Tyler. Holding this item in his hands, X asked, "Isn't this thing unique?" He then smiled and thanked Ron for this precious item and said that the Tyler house would definitely rise again. X left the Tyler house and continued on his way into the snow-covered mountain, waving goodbye to Ron. Ron smiled and also waved goodbye to X and wished him to take care of himself. With a slight smile, Ron told the boy, who had almost disappeared into the horizon, that his blessings would always be with him in the future. X's next target was a black cave bear, which is called a monster similar to field bosses. It has overwhelming strength and special effects compared to his level. After it is destroyed, ready-made equipment drops out of it, which can only be seen in bosses, so many users hunt for such bears. The peculiarity of the Black Cave Bear boss was its level, which was unknown. In the middle of the snow-capped mountains, 6 unknown players stood on a rift near a cave. They were divided into 2 groups, with the first group standing next to the cave complaining about the cold and the fact that there were no monsters on this side. In the other group, someone said that someone had probably already hunted them. X was among these people. Listening to the conversation, he said that thinking about it, they would never catch him in their lives. He added that hunting is about waiting. X frowned, looked around the place and said that there were really not enough monsters. Then, as he walked forward, the snow crunched under his feet, and X assumed that someone might be monopolizing the hunting grounds. Suddenly, someone shouted that he was satisfied that he had taken control of everyone else and offered to clear the area for their hunting and not to bother them. X was surprised and looked at what was happening. The protagonist was standing on a hill and watching these unknown people who shouted this, so he asked what these guys were doing. They appeared unexpectedly and were already claiming this place as their own. They were going to get all the monsters themselves, and then X was very angry and said that of course he knew it would happen. Can't they see that other users are waiting? And he called them damned bastards. Then, going downstairs, X said that they even placed high-level players to keep this good place for monster hunting, but no one invited them. Then these players noticed someone coming down. As X approached, he heard that he was being addressed, and the stranger called him a treasure and told him that this hunting ground was theirs and that they should leave while he was still good. This surprised the already angry man. After listening to this, X said that they were ridiculous. This surprised the strangers. Then X got ready and offered a match against each other. He added that he would show them how ruthless he could be. This stranger turned to X and told him to be careful and think about what he was saying, that he could consult with him about it and get out of here. X laughed sarcastically and asked the stranger if he was just going to say that. He told him not to waste his time and just attack him. Then this unfamiliar player got really angry and shouted, asking if he knew what level he was at, what he was talking about fighting against each other. He asked if he wanted to be thrown out of the game today. A notification window appeared in front of both of them, and the stranger said that he agreed and accepted the fight. When the stranger saw X's level, he was surprised, only level 50. He is even more of a loser than he thought. Then the unknown player grabbed a spear and mockingly said that only level 50 dares to challenge him is ridiculous to him, and added that he would make him regret it. The battle started, the unfamiliar player rushed at X with a spear and he didn't stand aside and started fighting. Everything around him sparkled. Sparks flew from the spear and the stranger could not realize that his opponent had just knocked his spear away. X had incredible strength, he had invincible power. The player was amazed that he had struck him in just a few seconds. And he was able to deflect his spear so easily. X hit the stranger right in the chest with his invincible strength. The stranger was confused, he didn't understand what the hell was going on and whether this bastard was really only level 50, he thought that X was too fast for him to keep up. Then the protagonist struck another strong and fast blow, and the stranger was able to deflect it with his spear. But having deflected this blow, he shouted that this is some kind of madness, how can it be, right? But X ruthlessly delivered blow after blow. But the unfamiliar player mentally calmed himself down and asked him not to panic. He had to find his weakness and break through, there had to be some weakness. But suddenly, after another blow from X, something incredible happened, the spear of the stranger was shattered and shattered into small pieces. The stranger shouted that this was ridiculous. He was simply destroyed, just like his spear. Suddenly, a notification window appeared in front of the stranger, informing him that the battle was over and he was defeated. The people who came with the unfamiliar player were confused, couldn't believe that their guild leader was defeated, and asked who was this guy. Who was the guy who defeated their leader? Then X pointed his sword at them and said that this land was now his to hunt and they should leave immediately. X was left alone among the snow-capped peaks to hunt further. Looking around the area around the cave where the bear might have been, he said that he had just wasted his time with these distrustful boys. Looking around, he said that he had heard that a black cave bear appears in this place. The one he was hunting for. He thought that he should look for the tracks of the black cave bear near the lake and headed there. It was near the lake that he found the tracks. But even if it is a black cave bear, it is still an animal, it will eventually want to drink water. But suddenly he saw something that surprised him. A system window appeared next to the tracks he found, informing him that he had found the tracks of a black cave bear. Then he happily shouted out that he had finally found it. He decided to follow the tracks and assumed that if he followed them, he would find the current location of the black cave bear. Just as he thought, the tracks led him to a large black cave. He took a closer look at the black cave. He noticed two red lights shining from it. Looking closer, he realized that he had found exactly what he was looking for. It was a black cave bear. The cave was incredibly large, and the bear itself could barely fit in it. His eyes were burning with red fire and he roared fiercely, and his incredibly large and powerful size inspired fear. But despite the fact that the black cave bear was really big and powerful, X was happy because it was easy enough to find. When the bear saw X, it roared fiercely. Suddenly, a system window appeared informing him that he was able to resist the fear of the big cave bear. Holding his sword at the ready, X laughed and said that he was very happy about it. He wasn't afraid of the bear at all, he was only interested in what he could get for defeating it. The bear rushed toward the boy to remove the unexpected guest from his path. His eyes were burning with red flames of rage. The bear rose up on its hind legs and started swinging its powerful big paws to knock X down, but he was quick and managed to dodge the bear's attacks. X was determined to win, so he thought he could finally use another skill he had never used. It was a shield-like skill that increased the chance of stunning by 50% during an attack and dealt damage proportional to the defense. It was a large and shiny Kalshmar shield, and X took it out of his inventory and held it up in front of him. The bear roared even louder and more fiercely. The fierce roar of the bear created a sound wave that almost threw the boy away, but he was strong and kept his feet well. It was time to go all in, so X decided that the best option was to go straight for the bear, so he stepped back and jumped right into the bear's mouth. But the bear wasn't going to wait to be beaten on the spot, so he tried his best to finish off his opponent. The bear didn't know what was happening, so it retreated into the cave, and X was getting closer and closer, his shield shining with a bright glow that the bear didn't like. A system window appeared, informing him that the black cave bear could not resist status effects, and another window said that the black cave bear was stunned. X thought that it was only a stun and needed to finish everything faster before the stun passed, so he started to advance on the bear faster and faster. He found some weakness in the bear's strategy, so he flashed his shield and got even closer. He shouted, "There," and shined his shield light on the bear. For a few seconds, the bear lost its sight. But this was enough for X, so with lightning speed he took his sword and pierced the bear through. Its body sparkled with golden luster, the beast was defeated. X walked away from the beast, which fell to the ground with a heavy burden, its body pierced by many golden rays, and the system window informed X that he had risen to a new level. X sat down near the place where the bear had just been lying, and in its place shone the objects that fall from the bear after its victory. Collecting them, X thought he would have to fight for at least 2 or 3 more rounds. But it seems he has become so strong that he can defeat the monster with just one punch. The item that dropped after the fight with the bear was the Winter Forest Blessing armor. This armor had superior defense, which compared to the sheet armor was imbued with the power of the Winter Forest. The special effects of this armor were that it reduced the damage taken by a few percent, but the amount of damage that could be reduced increased with the armor's strength. X immediately used this armor and it appeared on his body. Looking at himself, he said that it was very cool and he was lucky that he found this bear and was able to get this armor. Another item that dropped after the battle was the condensed meat of a black cave bear. It was meat full of flavor, but different for everyone. The special effects were an increased likelihood of vomiting if consumed raw. Holding a piece of meat, X noticed that this meat was very different from what he expected. But he was going to try to eat it anyway. A system window appeared, informing him that the heavenly flavor revealed the hidden taste of condensed cave bear meat. Another information window informed him that the strong game flavor of cave meat is absorbed in the body. X decided to try a piece of this meat and really didn't like it. He took it a little further away from his face and said that he couldn't eat it. Then he raised his hand, which shone with a golden glow, and said that even if the game smell was strong, he had a heavenly skill and smiled. His skill was heavenly cuisine. He tried to use the heavenly kitchen. But nothing happened, so he didn't understand why there was no reaction. He assumed that the skill probably didn't exist because there were no recipes. Or maybe even the heavenly kitchen refused to eat cave bear meat. But then he thought that he just needed to cook this tasteless meat to be happy and eat it. So he picked out all the spices he had and started cooking. Once he figured it out, he decided to start with frying. Meanwhile, at the Fate Game Company, Meiji Corporation. The company's employees were sitting at their desks talking, and the guy turned to the senior manager and said that it was a pity that there were not enough jobs. But it seems that everyone has potential here. The older man replied that this was an opportunity that could change their lives, so he was sure that many people had been preparing for it very hard. Then the older one added that the younger one could receive donations for his streams, and the company would even pay his salary, and smiled. But he continued, even if you compare it to money, will the fame be greater? The guy really didn't like what the older man said. The older man kept talking and said that of course the name, Fate Streamer, alone would definitely make him a famous person. He is gaining popularity only because of someone's incredible pleasure in watching someone else's game. Fate is currently preparing a personalized streaming platform that synchronizes in real life. The company was going to accept applications from only 30 Fate streamers, among many applicants. Then the senior continued that in this sense, it would inevitably be a disappointment for many. After all, it was obvious that the positions of the main streamers that would be chosen this time would be taken by strong players like Kaimu's. Then the boy turned to the older man and asked him what he thought about the director and his unusual behavior, which he found very strange. Then the older man asked why he was asking for the director, why he needed to talk about him. Then the young man continued that he usually doesn't touch their work, so he didn't know why the director was interfering in this project. Then the older man said he wasn't sure if he could call it interference. But the guy continued that it was true, he just recommended one streamer. Of course, it's probably interesting to know which single user the director chose. Even to gain the trust of NPC players, they do their best. They become an important help in achieving the goal, their understanding of fate is very impressive. They don't make mistakes for the sake of instant profit and are meticulous even in the smallest details. A hidden gem deserves a chance. It was a player named X. The man laughed and said that, besides, the moment when Fate's story changes one by one because of his actions. He liked that. Looking at this, the man said that it would be too mean of him to enjoy it himself. This man was the president of Meiji Corporations, Dr. Schubert. Meanwhile, in the game, X was trying to cook cave bear meat. He used the wrong recipe again and the meat didn't turn out right. While tasting the meat, he said that at times like this he wished his tongue was normal. Looking at the cooked meat, X thought that his heavenly taste makes anything delicious, so it is difficult to cook food that others will like. How could he make it so that other people could eat it? But then he realized something. He thought, why is he trying to cook delicious food for other people? And what was the point? He looked at the place of cooking. It would be enough if he just enjoyed the food. Thinking about this, he looked at the meat that was cooking on the fire, grabbed it and tasted it. Suddenly, an information window appeared, announcing that Heavenly Taste had found a hidden flavor in the first recipe of the king of gourmet food. X realized that it was simply an unbeatable flavor. Suddenly, he bent over backwards and shone from within with a golden light. And everything around him shone with golden rays. The illusion returned again. He fell into the illusion of the past. There were two people on the lawn, one of them was eating, and X did not understand what this place was. The one who was eating asked the other if he was really not hungry. But the other one in the red cape said that he would be fine, that it was important whether he knew they were surrounded. X thought that this man eating was the king of gourmets and he was pretty clean at this point, and wondered who the man in the red cape could be. Suddenly, from somewhere on the other side, he heard shouting, which he turned to. It was the army. They were shouting that they were coming to attack and there were only two enemies. Then a man in a red cloak jumped up and took a shield and said that Kalshmar would not lower his guard for a moment. Then X realized that the man in the red cloak was Kalshmar. The man in the red cloak shone with a bright radiance, even his eyes shone. The radiance seemed to come from within. He stood with his legs wide apart. It was a bear's posture. The army could not understand what was happening, they were confused. Kalshmar raised his fist and punched the ground with all his might. The earth split into several pieces, cracks went in different directions from the impact. But everything was pierced by golden rays. X was amazed. It was a bear's posture. He realized that this was the power of the man who became king. So Kalshmar smashed the earth with his fist with all his might and caused the army to become terrified. The earth began to crack in different directions, and golden rays of radiance pierced through the cracks in the earth. X was amazed at what he saw. He thought that this was the bear's posture, that this was the power of the man who had become king. The army shouted, and the cracks in the ground grew larger. The radiance was blinding the soldiers, and they could not do anything about it or resist it. Looking at what was happening, X shouted that the elite troops were destroyed in an instant. It happened so quickly and without much effort. The majestic figure of the mighty Kalshmar disappeared into the distance, his red cloak blowing in the wind, and dust and sparks flying in the air that had appeared from the ground. He looked back and looked toward X. X came back from the illusion of the past. Exhaled and said that there are degrees of loss of balance in such power, it is against the rules. The information window appeared again, saying that Heavenly Taste had discovered the hidden flavor in the first recipe of the King of Gourmets. The next information source said that a force that could shake heaven and earth was being absorbed into his body. Another news alert provided information that he had acquired the unique skill of bear posture. The new bear posture skill is a gourmet king's technique to shake heaven and earth with power. After fully mastering this skill, it can be used as a great source of strength. When used, strength increases by an additional 100% for 30 minutes and is 100% immune to all abnormal status effects. After reviewing the information that he had gained this skill that he had just admired, X was very excited. He was so excited that he said that with this power he even had a chance to take on an entire army. The power he received was incredible. X left the cave and looked at the snow-capped mountains. It was an incredibly beautiful landscape. The mountains were hiding behind each other and yet each one was majestic. X looked around and said that it was all very beautiful. Then he looked at the meat on the grill and said that he had finished the recipe for black cave bear meat, so he needed to return to Kalen soon. He smiled and said that if he used the bear's stance well, he could take without any threats at least 10 people as his company on his way to the top of this world in this multiplayer game. But for now, he was traveling alone. X continued on his way, but several people were watching him. They were hiding behind a large rock behind him, one of them even had a sword. One of them looked at X and noticed the armor he was wearing and asked if it was a blessing of the winter forest, or if he was lucky today. After all, this armor was quite rare. Then this thief said that he didn't know what kind of guy X was, but this armor was a gift for him, he would use it well instead. He pulled his hand out of his pocket and clenched it into a fist and said that although he looked like that, he was a man who was good at dogfighting. Then X heard some strange sounds behind him and shouted that whoever was there should not hide like a rat and come out to fight. The strangers who were hiding behind the stones jumped out and one of them called X a brazen bastard. The others shouted that they would stab him right now. They appeared around X. There were about 8 of them and one of them laughed and said, "Does he think he can fight them all together?" X was completely calm and looked at them and said that it was probably a bit much. The other one, who was holding 2 daggers, shouted that if he didn't fight, it would be useless. Probably one of the leaders of this group shouted that there was no one stronger than him on this earth and that X could not defeat him. Then X suddenly noticed that all the members of this group had very small and red eyes. They were fraudsters. In fate, if you repeat evil deeds, your reputation drops to zero. Fame turns into notoriety, and users become villains. The characteristic that would allow users to recognize villains was the red eyes. Realizing who he saw in front of him, X smiled. Then he grabbed his sword and said that he had tried something and it worked well. One of the crooks asked what he was muttering under his breath. So X decided to try a new skill he had recently learned called bear stance, and he shouted and took the required stance. Around him, cracks in the ground appeared, stones flew in different directions, and some of the crooks even fell to their knees. It was the first time they had seen such a thing, they did not understand what it was. The ground was splitting more and more, and those golden rays appeared. The recharge of this bear posture, every 24 hours, the amplifying effect lasts 30 minutes. X thought that 30 minutes was enough, grabbed his sword and stabbed it into the ground. His eyes glowed, stones and sparks flew around, golden rays spilled out and his cloak was fluttering in the wind. When X started using this stance, the swindlers even started laughing and one asked what he was going to do burying himself in the ground. And when they saw what was happening, they realized that they could not defeat him, it was an invincible force. After all the crooks were defeated, then throwing his sword over his shoulder X said, "There was no crazy strike here, was there?" He laughed and said that he needed to go hunting quickly before the effect of this skill wore off, he didn't want to waste time. Then he sat down next to the crooks who were lying on the floor, laughed and said that he would take care of everything for them. After a while, X was already in town. Near a restaurant in the central square of Nerville. A blond man asked who it could be. When he saw a guy he knew. A notification window announced that the search for the recipe of the King of Gourmet's quest was complete. X then went up to the man and told him that he was home now. The man's name was Chef Cologne. The chef laughed and put his hand on X's shoulder and said that looking at this armor, the blessing of the winter forest, he must have been successful in hunting the cave bear. He added that he had definitely completed the unfinished first recipe. Then X laughed and said that everything was exactly as he said and asked if the chef wanted him to do it for him right now. The chef refused and said that he could just say that he had already eaten it. But the cave bear meat was already ready and X said that the chef could just taste it. The meat was already on the plate, it was the first recipe of the king for gourmet cooking, black cave bear. The chef took the meat anyway and said that if so, then maybe he would have a good meal and tried a piece of meat. But the chef didn't like the meat and spat it out immediately. Then X thought that it would probably be hard for others to eat this meat, but it was delicious for him. Wiping his mouth with his hand, the chef said that X had definitely finished the recipe, but he had heard that they said the cave black bear dishes were so bad that they couldn't be eaten. But he added that it was still true. Just like Kalshmar's great-grandfather used to say. Then the chief shook hands with X and thanked him for making his dream come true and said that if he needed his help in the future or was hungry, he should contact him. Looking at his hand, he smiled sincerely. X shook hands with the chef and said that if so, he would definitely come back to see him. He then asked X where he planned to go next. He said that as the heir to the King of Gourmets, he thought he would start looking for other recipes. The chef agreed and said that before he left, he had something to tell him. Then he went on to say that he actually knew where his family member was. X was very surprised and asked the chef if this was true. Then the chef said that it was, but that old man was one grumpy guy, which made X laugh. Then X thought, grumpy, how old is he? The old man's name was Liglian Grutch. He lived 300 years ago. To be more precise, he was a vassal who, together with his great-grandfather Kalshmar, helped the Gourmet King. The Gourmet King suddenly disappeared and time passed. That old man went beyond loyalty and became crooked. To the point where he even denied his death. To be reunited with the King of Gourmet who would return someday, that he was already completely worn out and half a skeleton. He had become someone who had become undead himself. Then X raised his hands to the table and clasped them together and said with a thoughtful expression that this man was Liglian. Still thinking, he suggested that perhaps he was an unreasonable man. If you go straight west from Narville, you can see the sea. If you get close to 3 small and large villages, you can hear the sound of waves. It's the beach of the dead. So X had already been to the beach of the dead. It didn't look scary at all. It was an ordinary beach and an ordinary sea. At that moment, a boy and a girl were swimming in the sea and having fun. He asked a man who was fishing there about this place, and he said, "What beach of the dead is he talking about?" He had never heard of it. It was the Sea of Lovers. This place is very popular with young people. Chewing on his food, X said that no matter how much he looked around, this was really the right place. Suddenly, the notification window announced that Heavenly Taste had discovered a hidden flavor in the orange juice. But X didn't pay attention to it. He had other things on his mind. It was impossible that Kalen had lied to him. Then maybe the beach of the dead was a hidden place. As he ate the other dishes again, his information window informed him that his maximum health had increased by 5 points, and another information window informed him that Heavenly Taste had discovered a hidden flavor in the bidal kebabs that X was eating at the time. He speculated further that maybe this place was only for those who met special conditions, and then they could find the beach of the dead. Then, having filled his mouth with food, he thought, what should he do then? Behind him, a couple was talking. The guy asked the girl if they would go swimming in the sea. She said she liked it very much. Then X threw all the food he had in his hands backwards, which flew right at the couple. He said he needed to find a way to at least increase his fishing stats. The sea was crashing against the rocks with violent waves. X threw a fishing rod with a float into the sea to catch a fish. Suddenly the float dived under the water, which meant that a fish had been caught on its hook. He pulled the fish out of the water, and it was indeed a fish that had been caught on his hook, and it was rainbow-colored. Then he smiled and said that it was very wonderful, and he quickly caught another rainbow fish. So the man who was also fishing there said that he thought he was very good at fishing. He smiled and thanked him and said that compared to the elderly, he still had a long way to go. Then suddenly the information window informed him that he had won the title of Fishing Time. Then, suddenly, information about him appeared, including his name, his occupation as a celestial gourmet, his title as Fishing Time, and his level 81. And other detailed information about him. X then said that he had already earned the title of fisherman, which was given to him after fishing for over 100 hours. As he pulled out his fishing rod, he thought that no matter how much he thought about it, he couldn't remember how to get to the dead man's beach. But suddenly he saw something that confused him. The fish he pulled out confused not only him, but also the man who was fishing with him, who asked what kind of strange fish it was. The fish had only a skeleton. It was a spiny fish, or rather, Liglian had become a dead man waiting for the king of gourmets. Looking at this fish, X was very happy, because from this point on, this fish must be tied to Liglian, right? Then he took a bite of the fish, because the Heavenly Taste was supposed to confirm the information about Liglian. So he decided to eat it first before it was too late. Immediately, an information window appeared, informing X that he had entered the hidden location, Beach of the Dead. He immediately found himself in some unfamiliar dark place. Bones and human skulls were lying on the sand. And the sea was electric crimson with lightning in the sky. X looked around and enthusiastically said that it was really here. So, the information window announced that he was able to find a hidden area called the Beach of the Dead. The beach was littered with human skulls and bones, and the crimson-colored sea was raging with high waves. The sky was covered with black, thick clouds that were pierced by lightning. After looking around this hidden place, X was really impressed that he had finally found it. So, this was it, the Beach of the Dead. X found it and it looked really creepy. But as he stood on the sand in front of the sea, he said that it looked quite unusual. Then he suddenly thought that maybe if he went further he could find something and stepped 1 foot into the sea. But after walking only a few steps, X noticed that a black hand appeared from the ground behind him. Skeletons with swords began to emerge from the ground, looking creepy and with red eyes. X looked around and realized that they were skeletons. But then he said, "Doesn't this seem like a bit much for a welcome party?" And indeed, the number of skeletons was increasing every minute. But then suddenly X thought that with his new powers, it was probably a good thing, because he hadn't competed for a long time, so he didn't mind warming up and moving to the next level. The army of skeletons was advancing on X, and he didn't mind and even thought that this was the kind of welcome ceremony called a real party. X smiled and said that he wondered how much experience he would get for defeating the skeletons. X looked at all his opponents and said that he would have no problem killing each of them. Grabbing his sword, X shouted at them to attack him and started the fight. Suddenly, something strange happened. X shouted, "What is this? What is this energy?" He was confused. X was again thrown into some place he didn't understand. It was a very dark room with a black, extinguished candle on the floor. The guy screamed what it was and where he was. Not understanding where his weapons and experience had gone. Suddenly, the candle, which was standing on the floor in a golden candlestick, caught fire. X was very surprised and amazed at what he saw in front of him. A very strange projection of a man appeared in the room from the candle. He had dirty green hair, his eyebrows and eyes were shining with a green glow and there was a red glow around him. He had the really bad appearance of a dead man. He asked in a loud shout who he was. And how dare he behave like this? This man was really very angry. Then X even thought that this was a lot of pressure and was this even a person? Then suddenly X realized and asked the ghost if he was Legion. Hearing this, the man himself appeared in the room, not his projection, and in a calm voice he confirmed that it was correct. He was indeed Legion. Legion is a loyal subordinate who has been waiting for 300 years for the king of gourmets. He promised to change the world with the gourmet king, but his promise was not kept 300 years ago. Because the promise was not kept, Legion eventually turned his back on the gourmet king. Then Legion said that it was clear that he knew who he was. But why did he come here and try to meet him? What is the reason he wants to meet him? Then X explained to him that it was because he wanted to get the recipe of the king of gourmet food. When he heard what X said, Legion repeated the name, King of Food, with disgust and said that he had not heard that disgusting name for a long time. Then X thought that this was not good, his reaction was colder than he thought, so he thought that the best option would be to convince him with a lie for now. And smiling nervously, he said that he knew why he hated him. But the guy he hadn't seen in 300 years suddenly had a successor. When Legion heard that the king of gourmets had a successor, he got angry and snapped his fingers. Suddenly, the room they were in changed and X was amazed that Legion could change the place just by snapping his fingers. Then X thought he was a very big man with great powers. If his lies were not consistent, he would be in big trouble, so he had better be honest. The room changed to some kind of mansion. Legion sat down on a chair that looked like a throne and said that if the reason he came here was to meet him. And he paused. Then X addressed Legion in a respectful manner and said that he was saying the right thing. He continued that if he just gave him the recipe, he would do anything. He knows he doesn't like it, but he's really asking for a favor. Legion smiled and asked if he really thought so. He added that he was probably better than the king of gourmets after all and said that it wouldn't be that hard to give him a recipe. Then X thought that was good and he really should try it, thanked him and added that he was ready to do it right now. Then Legion said that there was something X had to do that he couldn't do with his current level, so X asked him what that could mean. There were so many questions in X's mind. What does that mean? Why did he suddenly say that? Then Legion continued that it was good that he didn't run away just seeing the ingredients, because the recipe he knew used phoenix. X was surprised to hear about the phoenix. The phoenix is one of the existing legendary monsters in Fate. Monsters with the title of legendary have invincible power that cannot be measured by numbers. Then X thought that if it was a phoenix, even the greatest knights in the kingdom could not catch it. To him, it seemed like a crazy thing to try to catch a phoenix with his current level. Then, scratching the back of his head, he said that if that was the case. And he added that it was impossible, he felt like he had come to him for nothing. He said that he was sorry for bothering him, but that he would come to visit him again next time. Then Legion thought that he dared to call himself the successor of the king of gourmets. The king of foodies he knew did not raise any successor. As he watched X walk away, Legion thought maybe it was inevitable, not accidental. The king of gourmets did not change the world. But then he suddenly thought that maybe he could change the world. And he called out to X to wait. Legion said that he had been waiting for the Foodie King's successor for as long as he could, and added that it was true that he hated the Foodie King, but he thought that X had come here for a reason and that it was fate. So he would look forward to seeing him again. X came back and said that he knows that he is carrying a heavy destiny. That's why he wants to help him, even though he doesn't know what the exact recipe is. Did Legion suddenly realize that X wanted to help him? But X thanked him for his help. So Legion laughed and said that it was good that it was not as hard as he thought. It was a relief for him to pass on his unique skill to him. Then an information window appeared, informing him that he had acquired the unique skill, Death Refusal. With the help of loyal subordinates, you can fulfill their trusts regardless of malice or not. Fulfilling their request can be good for your reputation. Restrictions for those who have the skill of denying death. The reward is Legion's favor. Then X realized that denying death was probably a new quest. Legion said that he had just given him one powerful but practical power. Holding a piece of green stone above his hand that was floating in the air. He said it would be a great help to him, because he was very weak. But it was very sudden for X and he could not understand what was happening. Then Legion said that a tree that is hit by a strong wind will have strong roots, so he should try to adapt to it. After saying that, Legion sent all those pieces of rocks at X, who tried to dodge them. Then an information window informed X that an NPC had attacked him. Then the shocked X thought that he would die from one such attack. Just to get one skill. How strong was he? Suddenly, a new information window appeared again, informing him that the unique skill, Death Refusal, had been activated. Two more information windows informed him that he had just escaped death and that he had been resurrected as if he were not alive. X did not understand what was happening. He was confused, his body was changing. So, death denial: when a player dies, they are resurrected like non-dead lower-level soldiers. The stats are redistributed to match the conditions of the lower-level undead soldiers. If you don't die due to the Death Refusal skill, you will be revived at your full body and condition before death. But if you die, you will be sentenced to death. The higher the level, the lower the chance of being resurrected. X's rank is the lowest soldier of the undead. X couldn't realize that he was actually still alive. This meant that after being resurrected, he could become undead. He didn't think that would happen. Then he said that appearance was important to him and asked Legion what information windows said about the statistics being distributed, and if it was true. Then he was shocked. It was distributed. He thought it would be a promotion. In the ranks of the undead soldiers, his name was listed as X, his title was Fisherman for Time, level 90, fame 440. Mana, intelligence, and stamina were at 0. Then he asked how strong he was when he became a lower-ranked undead soldier. Then Legion laughed and said that X looked better than him. X also laughed and thanked him. Then, opening the blue portal, Legion said that denying death is more practical and powerful than anything else. Therefore, he must use this power to bring the egg out of the nets. X told him that he understood. The portal opened into the dead forest, the place where the king of the dead and Legion hid important eggs to protect them from criminals. When X entered the portal, an information window appeared, informing him that he was entering a hidden area of the forest of the dead. Then he looked around and said he needed to find the nest with the egg. As he walked along the path, he thought he came here to look for it because he had been told to do so. Were these eggs important ingredients for the recipe? Then suddenly he saw a red egg in the trunk of a tree that was illuminated by a light. He was happy to have found it. Was it not easy to find? The egg was in the nest of the tree trunk and was wrapped in branches. At first, X thought it looked different. But suddenly it started to crack. X realized that the egg was breaking. But if it broke, what should he tell Legion? Something strange started to come out of the egg. It was red in color with horns and wings like a dragon. Then X was confused. He realized that it was something that was in the egg hatching and thought, should he take responsibility for it? But suddenly, behind the confused X, someone in a black cloak with a hood and a scythe appeared. He swung to hit the boy. But X noticed it in time and was shocked to realize that there was an ambush. Then X pulled out a shield from his inventory and covered himself from the intruder and thought, is this a competition? A duel with such high-ranking monsters would not be easy. As he repelled the attacks, X thought that Legion, that jerk, how could he do this to him? The creature that hatched from that egg suddenly appeared next to X and howled, then X didn't realize what it was doing. When the stranger saw and heard the creature, he trembled. The stranger got scared and ran away, leaving X confused. Then the boy said that this stranger just heard the voice of the creature and ran away. That was strange. Meanwhile, in Legion, he had been cursed for 300 years and was only waiting for the king of gourmets. But it was okay if the man who became his successor came. Sitting on the throne, he said that he would still help him, but not through the king of foodies. Now he doesn't have to wait for him to just change the world. If this guy can make his dream come true, that will be enough for him. Suddenly, he was brought out of his thoughts by the portal he had just opened, and X came out of it with a creature and told him that he had brought what he had asked for. But then X said that the egg had hatched there. What should they do now? Legion said he gave him a quest with all the possibilities and asked if he liked it. Then the information window immediately informed X that he had successfully completed the quest. Then holding the creature that was sitting on X's hand, he said that it was very cute and he would not forget its kindness. He had brought this creature here just to save it, so he would give it something, because he had allowed it. Then Legion told him that it was a reward for the quest he had completed and added that he should just accept it carefully. Then the creature made a cute sound. Then an information box appeared, explaining that the creature that hatched was a dragon and asking if he would like to have it as a pet. When X realized that it was a dragon, he was amazed and thanked Legion for this errand in which he received a dragon as a reward. Then the young man said that now he could use this dragon and make his journey easier. It was so sweet. The dragon must have liked the idea of traveling together, so he began to caress the boy. Then X said that they would work together and called him Yun Jiang, which the animal liked very much. Then Leg Lion smiled and repeated the name Yun Jiang. He said that X had really named him badly. And he added that he should take care, the successor to the king of foodies. Then two different-sized purple rings appeared behind Legion, and red lightning came out of his hand, which he raised. But X shouted at him to wait a minute. X also shouted that he wanted to ask him many things. He shouted even louder that he could do whatever he wanted. But suddenly X woke up to a notification. It was an information box alerting him that the Gourmet King Recipe Legion quest was complete. X exhaled a sigh of relief. It wasn't a dream, he had completed the quest after all. Sitting on the bed and looking at the information window, he thought, maybe he became the first owner of a dragon in Fate. If so, it's cool. Suddenly, another notification came, Dear X, a note from Fate has arrived. Looking at the envelope, he thought, what could it be? When he opened the notification, he was very surprised. The notification contained the following information: Congratulations. You have been selected as a Fate Meiji streamer. X couldn't believe his eyes that he had become a Fate streamer. Meanwhile, X logged out of his account in the game. He got out of bed and said that he had been lying in bed for more than 2 days and his body was in pain. Then he said that he still got the equipment for the relic class and a chance to become a streamer. So he smiled and said that it was a blissful agony for him. And he added that he would conduct a thorough investigation into the fate of streamers. He turned on his computer and began his investigation. He opened several pages that talked about Destiny streamers. After reading them, he concluded that no matter what kind of broadcast he would do, he would earn a fixed monthly fee just for the conversations themselves. Real-time donations with significant incentives for the number of viewers. In addition, it guarantees 100% additional advertising revenue. In other words, even if you just get a fixed monthly salary while talking on streams. Then X joyfully shouted that there would be no more fried chicken in the future. He thought, is there a reason why someone wouldn't want to do this? Let's get rid of the chicken restaurant and play games. He has to make money playing games. Then he thought that for the broadcast, he would start by hiding his profession and focus on the cooking show, the one he was most confident in. The name would be Monstrous Mukbang Show X. So he was going to get 100 viewers step by step. Then he decided to look at the rating of previous streams. The War Machine Guild was in first place, the Surfer Guild was in second place, the Jijix Guild was in third place, the Kinju Guild was in fourth place, 21EN was in fifth place, the Cream Guild was in sixth place, and Ryan TV was in seventh place. X was only on 67th place. When he saw this, he said that he expected it. Then thinking about it, he said that it was obvious, but there was a big difference compared to the War Machine Guild who were in first place. First, he needed to slowly level up by collecting mukbang ingredients. He said with a sigh that he had been playing games for several days, but hadn't slept, so his eyes were closing by themselves and he started yawning. Then he decided that he needed to take a break first, and then slowly he would start again. He might fall if he pushed himself too hard. So, the final show of the Fate streaming began. The host walked out on the colorful stage in front of the audience with Fate written in big letters behind him and started by greeting the audience. He greeted everyone and said that everyone had been waiting for this for a long time. Finally, the final of Kaimo's streaming began. He went on to announce the first War Machine Guild leader in the stream, and invited the audience to watch Kaimo's conquest of the Dark Leaken Slope right now. The ruins of the Dark Leaken Slope appeared on the big screen behind the host. Soldiers with spears stood in front of the ruins, and a man with a sword stood on a rise opposite them, with two other people standing next to him. Then the man with the sword said that everyone should not worry and continue as they usually do. All the soldiers shouted, "Yes," in one voice. Then the leader of the war machines said that they had tens of millions of viewers behind them, those who would help prove their strength together. And he added that this was level 350, the Dark Lichen Slope. Another man standing next to the leader said that they were going to defeat everyone and prove themselves and added that everyone should get ready for the battle. The Dark Leaken Slope of Conquest is a monster strong enough to destroy a small kingdom in the past. Even the best guilds are now hesitant to take on this difficult quest. This monster was very stout with a horn on its head and red shiny eyes, sharp teeth and powerful arms. Now the real battle would begin. The audience watching this show was amazed at the scale of this team. X was watching the show at his job at a restaurant. Then the host asked the question that everyone was interested in: could the War Machine Guild succeed in this quest? So the War Machine Guild started the battle, the leader shouted, "Charge," and all the warriors rushed at the monster. The warriors were advancing, there were many people and the monster was not alone, there were 3 of them. The warriors of the War Machine Guild were ruthless and the monster was not going to let them live. The next day in the Desert of Oblivion. X was in the Desert of Oblivion. He came here without planning it and wondered if he would find the right ingredients for mukbang. Looking over his shoulder, he saw a red scorpion crawling across the hot sand, and he thought that it might be a baby desert scorpion. If so, it means that desert scorpions are being introduced here. X then said that at this level, he could definitely consider this as mukbang material and added that he was choosing desert scorpions. X then took out his sword and said that now no more complications, he would try it first and then decide. So he rushed at the scorpion very quickly. With just one swing of his sword, he killed the scorpion. Holding the scorpion's head, he enthusiastically said that he needed to find a place somewhere and try to cook it there. While cooking the scorpion, X thought that, contrary to its appearance, it was probably very tasty. After cooking the scorpion, X looked at the dish and thought that he should first get in the mood to try it. But then he decided to try the heavenly cuisine. Then he made a wave of his hand and summoned his unique divine cooking skill. A golden orb shone in his hands, which he directed at the dish made from the desert scorpion. The scorpion, which had previously been red, changed its color to golden yellow. After breaking off a piece of the scorpion, X tasted it. An information window immediately appeared, informing him that the divine taste had revealed a hidden flavor in the special roasted body of the scorpion. Another information window informed him to ignore the heat and stand in the desert for 60 minutes. Tasting the scorpion meat, X thought it was much tastier than he expected. Another information window appeared, informing him that his desert agility had increased by 30 points for 60 minutes. Holding another piece of scorpion meat in his hands, X thought that he wondered if Yonyang would like it too. And should he try to give the dragon a snack too? Then he shouted, "Summon," and a purple portal appeared in the sand. Then a red dragon appeared and made a cute, cackle sound. He immediately flew to X, who laughed and said that he had even forgotten about him for a moment. He gave a piece of scorpion to the dragon that was sitting on his shoulder and said that it was a fried scorpion that he had cooked and he hoped to have it today. He added that they should eat it and hunt together to get the ingredients for mukbang. But suddenly something strange happened, and X's foot fell into the sand. Falling down, X shouted, "Earth," and the dragon was also surprised. The ground on which X was standing began to fall apart, so he began to fall under it. X screamed, completely falling under the ground. He was flying somewhere. But suddenly an information window appeared, informing him that this was a desert scorpion trap. X fell into the pit with a thud, and it was dark, and a column of dust rose after the fall, but the red eyes of the scorpions were still visible, shining in the dark. They surrounded X from all sides, and he pulled his sword out of his inventory. He shouted in annoyance, because being trapped by scorpions in the desert is very annoying. And he motioned for them all to come over, because today he was going to level up significantly. The scorpion that was coming up behind X raised its tail to wound the enemy. But the scorpion managed to hit X right in the back, spitting out blood and shouting that they were cowards for attacking from behind. Then X noticed that his feet were sinking very deep into the ground and it was very difficult for him to move. It was probably the mud. Then he thought that if his feet were tied up like that, it would be hard for him to dodge. Then an information window appeared, warning X that he was bleeding openly. X was shocked and couldn't understand that this bleeding was due to the attack from the back. Seeing that X was in a bad way, the dragon, Yunjian, decided to take matters into his own hands, so he screamed and headed straight for the scorpion. Seeing how fearlessly Yunjian picked up the scorpion by its tail, X called out to him and told him that they had to get out of here first. The dragon wouldn't let go of the scorpion, so X shouted at him to think. Suddenly, X noticed another scorpion coming in from behind. Then he thought it was another surprise attack from behind. Then, cutting the scorpion in half with his sword, X said that although his legs were tied and it was difficult to move, he could still move his upper body, and he noticed that they were still quite intelligent creatures. But he cannot take them lightly. The information window appeared again, informing X that the bleeding effect was penalized by anemia. Some black, incomprehensible substance came out of X's mouth, and he screamed that it had even caused him to become anemic. X fell down on one knee and said that everything had gone from bad to worse, and even with the rejection of death, he could not solve the current situation. Then he realized that he was gradually losing his stamina and he had no time for this. So he gathered all his strength and stood up. He grabbed his sword and said that at such moments he must remain calm, so he tried to calm down. Then he looked at the scorpions that surrounded him and thought that it was okay if it was just one of them, he could handle it, but he couldn't handle all of them at once. Then suddenly X thought that he could use only one skill in this situation. The dragon was very concerned about the boy's condition. Then X told him not to worry, because he would never die so easily. Already exhausted from bleeding, X watched the scorpions gather around him, thinking that if he could fight them one by one, he could handle it, but if they attacked him at once, he would not.